Yes. Hello, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us today for the Believe in Brits podcast. It is Thursday, the 12th of September, just coming off the back of week one. The lack of a better word, chaps, soul crushing week one defeat to the Dallas Cowboys, 33-17. Quite a lot to get into, but first of all, we've got a full set for the second time this season. Sean, how was Florida, bud?
It was lovely, mate. Long distant memory now. It's been a week already, so it feels like a lifetime ago, mate. But yeah, all good, mate. All good.
Fantastic. And why not? Obviously, you couldn't join us in Birmingham on Sunday, but probably feeling like that was probably a good call, considering.
Yeah, I'd imagine, although you probably had a bit of fun during the first game's window, I'd imagine the night ended pretty depressingly. So, yeah, probably a good decision not to drive 3-4 hours to watch that mess, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, it started off really, really quite nicely. So Sean and I were watching the Bengals and the Patriots was the main thing that we had on screen. We could see the Falcons Steelers game in far down the end of the bar, but we were right there for the Patriots Bengals game, which gave us quite a bit of at one point all the other AFC North teams were losing and we were yet to come up, and things were looking good, and in the end it kind of went a little differently. So as we said last week, we're not going to just go into a straight sort of like recap of games and then a preview of the next. We want to sort of get away from that a little bit. So what we're doing instead this week, we're calling it, is it just week one? And what I'm going to do, chaps, is I'm going to come out with some things of which I've been reading up online and by watching some of the punditry and listening to some of the podcasts and all the rest of it, for things of which some people are trying to just sort of like brush aside as it's just week one. Week one doesn't really matter. Week two is when it really gets into it. And you tell me as to whether or not we should, whether it's something that we should be looking at and potentially being a little concerned by. We will get on to the actually, you know what? Let's jump into it first of all. So obviously the first bit of news, which we probably should go into, is the updated situation around Deshaun Watson. So it's been quite the week for Deshaun Watson. He lost his dad last week, and he lost a friend of his from his college days. Played on Sunday. Played rather terribly on Sunday, as I look at the stats here. 24 from 45, 169 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. And then on Monday, what was it, around 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon our time, so early in the morning their time, we see that yet another lawsuit has come his way, and this is the first one that actually shows sexual assault, I think it is, isn't it, as one of the charges involved. And that is obviously now, for those of you that haven't seen the news today, Tony Busby, who's been the solicitor that's been taking on these cases and has took this one on, has said that apparently they've known about it for about 10 months. Deshaun Watson denies knowledge of the person in question, but there is pertinent video, is what Busby describes, to go forward with this. Now, guys, a lot of stuff has flown up in the air here. Not just the fact that it's another one, the the seeming facts behind what Busby has put out in his statements about what has transpired and what's in the lawsuit. But also pundits have then gone on to say as to what this could mean for the Browns as well. As in, so Pro Football Talk came out pretty much as soon as this went in and said it was Florio who said, I've seen the contract writing. If it's a new lawsuit outside of the ones of which were made known to them at the time of signing, and it impacts his ability to play, then it could void the contract. It's known as paragraph 42. Wayne, let's come to you first on this. I mean, a lot to unpack there. And considering this entire debacle and this podcast has been very, very one-sided, I think, in terms of where we actually sit on all this. Like, this seems, as terrible as it is, this seems like to be the way to just wipe our hands of the whole thing and, be able to root for a guy again.
Yeah, I mean, if they do, if they are able to cut him and cut their losses at where they are, it would be, a big day for the franchise, in my opinion, because the greatest mistake that they've ever made, and they've made a few, would be kind of over. Like you said, the three of us have spoken about it at length. We've had to speak about it at length multiple times because of the nature of the allegations and how many there have been. And, it's dragged. This is obviously year 3 of it, and we've had to speak about it every single year. It's tough to have anything new to say. Something that we haven't said before, because we've said it all before. All three of us tend to agree in where we sit and what we think about the whole issue, and where we think blame lies and stuff like that. I think if this has been known for 10 months, I struggle to quite wrap my head around how the Browns are now finding out about it. That's a thing that bothers me, because they said that they'd done more investigations into this than they've done for any other decision they've made since they've been in charge of the Browns. So again, seems to have slipped the net in that case. Yeah, it's just a tough situation, and again, it's another season we're talking about things completely not to do with football and stuff that, quite frankly, we could do without talking about. To be honest, none of us want to be talking about this. None of us want to be listening to this. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's a difficult thing all around, really.
Absolutely. And I mean, the last person who would want to be talking about anything other than actual just belt and braces football is Sean. And I imagine that it's just become quite tiring, just in general, Sean.
It has, mate, and I think to try and give the conversation a little bit of balance, I think, as you've said, we're all pretty united in terms of our view on it and all the rest of it. Try and give this some balance. Let's work on the assumption, and let's obviously go on the, innocent until proven guilty line. How on earth can you concentrate on what is already a difficult thing to do in terms of playing quarterback in the NFL when you, as you said at the top of the show, lost a father, lost a close friend, coming back from an injury, brand new offensive coordinator, new playbook to learn. You then get this out in the media. It's just horrible. I mean, I have little sympathy, and it's horrible to say that, little sympathy for the team in as much as they got involved in this and they never had to. So yes, it's potentially a get out of jail card that potentially could be handed to them. Whether they deserve that or not, it's a slightly different conversation. But obviously, from a fandom point of view, it's just horrible that we have to talk about it every week. We have to think about it every week, regardless of whether it's, proven, not proven, etc., etc. There's 31 other teams this week that they're talking about the quarterback played, and they're talking about the game, and they're talking about what they need to do. We're talking about, can we cut this guy? And bear in mind, this is a guy that at the time was given the biggest ever guaranteed contract in the game's history. The play should have been so much better than what it is. that's a separate conversation. I've always tried my best to try and separate the two issues, and there are more than enough issues surrounding the play, regardless of the stuff off the field. But the reality is, your patience for what's happening on the field is stretched even further by the fact that this continues to be something that has to be dealt with week in and week out, seemingly. It's incredibly difficult to sort of get behind and root for the team and for him in particular when this is going on all the time. It is pretty horrible. And every day that something comes up in the news, you sort of think, well, can it get any worse? Can it get any worse? And all of a sudden, before you know it, there does seem to be something worse that has dropped. So, for me, yeah, I'm sick and tired of talking about it. I don't think it should be ignored, however. It does need to be talked about. But I think the Browns are kind of stuck, to be completely honest, because unless the league intervene, they are really kind of stuck. Because, if they bench him, what's that doing? Because ultimately, if it does go away at some point in the future, well, you've just again lost more and more reps without understanding what you've got and trying to actually rebuild confidence and all the rest of it. You continue to play him, it looks terrible from a PR point of view. They're kind of stuck in no man's land, but as I say, this comes back to the point that we've always made consistently. Potentially shouldn't have ever got involved in the first place, and none of this would have been happening, would it? So, really shitty situation, mate, to be honest.
And just to add to
Yeah.
that, I think me and Josh spoke last week about the lack of hype and stuff surrounding us this season, and we both pointed towards the fact that it's been difficult to get behind this team, fully support this team, and get excited about this team for 3 years because of one obvious reason. And within a week, we've been reminded once again how difficult it is to sort of get excited and root for this team. I think what a lot of people, us included, I think, did 3 years ago was sort of say, like, yeah, he's one member of this team, and we can sort of root for the team and not root for him. But it's been too difficult. Like, I think we said at the time that because he's the quarterback, everything sort of runs through him. So anything you're getting excited about on offense has direct links to him. Anything like the team does, like the team loses Sunday, as sure we'll get into it, but for the most part, due to him, like, it's impossible just to take him out of the scenario completely and say, yeah, I'm gonna root for the Browns. I'm gonna get excited for the Browns, but he's a complete non-factor. It doesn't work like that because it's obviously the most important position in the NFL. He's going to speak after every game. He's going to speak in midweek. He's going to, all of the focus is going to be on him and how he does. And it's just impossible just to take him out of the scenario and just get excited about everything else.
Yeah, definitely. I tell you what, let's draw a line under that because I feel like every time that we do it, it just sort of depresses us a little bit and just sort of takes away from the rest of which we try our damnedest to do. But like you say, it sort of permeates through everything, and it will permeate through the show as well, just as we talk through the game, because obviously he's the focal point, of which definitely adds to it all. So let's go and do what we plan to do at the top of the show. So I'll give you a number of things of which I've seen throughout the week. You tell me if it's just week one, just a bit of rust, something of which we should see turn around this coming week against the Jags, and if not, then in the next two games after that, of which are seemingly, and I'm going to use the term seemingly, easier as far as the eye test goes. Yeah, I'm still dreading Danny Dimes because you just know that that's going to be the redemption game. Can you tell I've had a good week, chaps? Can you tell I'm super optimistic? Yeah, last week's show taught me nothing to win. So, the first one. The Dallas Cowboys recorded 40 total pressures against the Cleveland Browns offense, more than the next highest, which was the Philadelphia Eagles by 11. This is a two-parter. First of all, is it just week one? And second of all, is it all on the offensive line?
Yeah, I can take this one first. yes, it's just week one in the sense that it's not going to be 40 every week because they came up against a really good Dallas Cowboys front. It's also no, it's not just week one because of the second answer being that most of that was Watson's fault. You know, the time he takes in the pocket, we've said it for ages, like he takes so long. You know, he scrambles out of safe pockets and puts himself under a lot of duress. You know, even when he rolls out and there's nothing there, and you can see he's going to throw it away. He throws it away late, which ends
Yes.
up with him on the deck when he doesn't need to be at all. I think PFF actually, obviously, Dallas got 6 sacks in that game. PFF didn't credit any of them to an offensive lineman, which sort of tells you all you need to know. So
It's a good stat. I didn't see that one.
Yeah, I don't like the Jags have a pretty good defensive line, so next week might be difficult. Going forward, and yeah, to be fair, the Giants aren't bad either, to be fair. So, but going forward, I don't expect there to be 40 pressures a week because I think Watson will have to throw quicker going forward, and the offensive line will get healthier going forward as well. But I do think looking league wide, our pressures and our sacks are going to be up there this season because of who we got at QB.
Yeah. So just to add some numbers to that, the offensive line actually gave Deshaun Watson an average of 4.8 seconds a throw throughout the game. And on those sacks, I think that the average across them was 4.2 seconds to throw. To give some context to this, and this might be one where Sean tells me to settle down, but Baker Mayfield, who was the FedEx Air, can't remember the name of the award, but the Airman of the Week or whatever the hell they call it, had 2.4 seconds to throw and completed something like 90% of his passes. When you start looking at that sort of thing, Sean, you've got to, like, I know that the offensive line wasn't great, and it was you saw Dwan Jones, for example, with the penalties, for example, which put us into bad situations. But it definitely is a bit of a tit for tat. But I imagine that for you, the penalties are probably more concerning with the line than the actual protection of it all.
Yeah, penalties were a big concern throughout the game. I think we had 11 or 12 accepted penalties, and obviously there would have been a few more that weren't accepted. So, the penalties were a real issue the whole game. It felt like anytime we had a reasonable gain on first down, it got brought back. And we were constantly playing behind the chains. This team at this moment in time, at least, isn't designed to play from behind. And I mean that in terms of playing behind the schedule, in terms of driving down and distance. I do think there are some concerns for the line, if I'm being honest. I think, Dwan Jones had a really poor game. I think the eye test for me, he just had a poor game. I know Owen's mentioned PFF there. I'd be interested to see what they graded him. But, the eye test wasn't good on Dwan Jones on Sunday. And when we talk about the tackles missing, let's not forget we were all quite happy with the way that Dwan played last year.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I still only really view it as the starting left tackle missing. Now there is an argument that Conklin comes back and plays right tackle, and if Wills is back, that Dwan Jones becomes the sixth lineman. So I appreciate he might by default stop being a starter. But for me, the lack of depth at tackle is something that hasn't necessarily seemingly been addressed throughout the off season. I think the interior needs to do better just based on the amount of money that's paid there. I think we all are expecting at some point Joel Batonio is going to start to slow down. There were signs of that towards the back end of last year. So I do think there are some concerns for the line. I agree. I'd like to think it's a week one thing, in terms of, everybody looked rusty on offense. Let's be honest. There wasn't really anybody that came out of the offensive side of the ball with a particularly, positive sort of school report for Sunday. So I'd like to put a lot of it down to rust, but I tend to agree. I think that let's see what it's like in the next couple of weeks. It's certainly got to play better, and I think just to give you a bit of additional context, if you like, to your 4 point whatever seconds to throw, that's sort of unheard of, and I think that comes down to the point that Owen was saying. This is just about actually holding on to the ball.
Yeah.
4 seconds, in theory, the way that these guys run, receivers would be 40, 30, 30, 40, 50 yards down the field, and the ball's not being thrown that far. The offense is built predominantly on timing concepts. It should be reach the top of your drop, get the ball out, and that's not what's happening. So I won't get too further into that point. I'm sure you're going to ask some questions about some of the other stuff. So I'll shut up, mate, and let you ask the next one.
Before I do, Wine, if you just found out what DeJuan Jones's PFF grade was, I saw you frantically typing away. I didn't know if it was for that. Seeing a shake of the head there. Sean, one for you, just because it was something which you really sort of went in on during the second half, in particular on Sunday. The defense only conceded 33 or more points on 3 occasions, I think it was last year, 3 or 4 occasions. Obviously, conceding 33 points here, only a couple of sacks. Is that just week 1? Is that all on the defense? What is this something of which is going to be more of a trend?
So I think for me, the defense has got to start to make some adjustments. I think there's enough game tape out there now for teams to have a successful game plan against the Browns, and that's what the Cowboys adopted on the weekend. I think the Browns really struggle with motion. If you think about those games against the Rams and the Broncos last year, the sort of back-to-back games on the road where we had pretty significant beatings both weeks, they used a lot of motion. The Browns seemingly really struggle with that. I'm tired of seeing jet sweeps be so effective against us. I think CD Lamb probably ended up with as many rushing yards as he did receiving on Sunday. It felt like that, at least in terms of watching it. Every time he seemingly got the ball, it was good for a 7 or 8 yard gain. It was.
You'll be glad to know he had double the amount of receiving yards and a bit of change. 61 receiving, 25 rushing.
Fair enough. But yeah, that for me has been a constant problem. That game plan, if you like. I think the Browns don't necessarily disguise their coverages very well. I think if you look in terms of the film breakdown of the Brandon Cooks touchdown, Dak gets a very easy tell. He motions a man, everybody moves across. It's very obvious that they're in man to man. And the concept's quite simple, isn't it? He's got 2 outside receivers breaking inwards and Cooks runs the corner out. Doesn't help that Juan Thornhill obviously has a bit of a mental breakdown, because obviously that's why he's so wide open. But realistically, that was likely to be a touchdown anyway, in terms of the way that the concept was drawn up. So I do think the Browns defense has got some figuring out to do. There's no doubt that if they get the less mobile quarterback, that they, can do some good things. But, Dak was able to, without particularly playing well, always be in control of the game, I thought, on Sunday. And let's be honest, if we're being really brutally honest, the Cowboys took the foot off the gas in the second half. The punt return for a touchdown, which opened up the second half, what was it, 27-3 or whatever, that point on the scoreboard. Let's be honest, that was game over then. And realistically, they just milked the clock for the rest of the game. So I think if they'd have tried, the Cowboys would have put up 450 plus yards on Sunday if they needed to. They seemingly were able to move the ball at will. So I don't think it's just a week 1 thing. I think the Browns have got some figuring out to do, because when they do lose, as you say, they tend to put up a huge amount of points.
There's definitely some points to that which I'd agree to. One thing which I thought that we were quite good at was getting them to punt early. I think that in the first quarter, I think they had to punt 3 or 4 times in their first 5 drives, of which against what is a good Dallas offense. I think that Dallas's main strength is in their offense. That's something which I was really pleased by, but this has been a problem more so when we were down to our 3rd or 4th string quarterback down the stretch last year, is that if we go a couple of scores down, or when it looks hopeless, like you say, it's almost as if it's a case that we're not necessarily as into it by that point. I do think there's some week 1 rust. Denzel Ward dropped about 2 or 3 should be interceptions, which he raised. in his presser yesterday as well. So he was obviously a little miffed by that. I thought that they covered off our line quite well as well. That there was enough. There was enough going at Dak, but he was quite good at being able to, mobilize himself and get out of situations. I'm just looking at the stats here. They definitely took their foot off the gas, but it still doesn't explain as to just how much more efficient they were than us. The only thing at which neither of us were very efficient at all was third down efficiency. Dallas 4-14, us 2-15. I think that tells you a lot anyway. Owen, what do you say to all of that? Obviously, we were very, very high on the defense, especially over the off season as well, thinking it was just going to roll into this one. But are there cracks?
Yeah, I think we may see a bit of a downturn in terms of Schwartz is really aggressive in what he does, and he doesn't really veer too far from that. If you look at like his previous visits and stuff, from everything you hear, once teams start to figure him out, he's very reluctant to go and change things up. So that scares me a little bit. I think the defense is super, super talented in terms of like every player on that defense. So I think it may be a little bit of a blip. We've seen blips like this from them in the past, and then they bounce back pretty well. So hopefully that's what they'll continue to do. I think some of the defense actually played really well on Sunday. I thought Denzel Ward was really good. Yeah, he gave up a couple of catches, but they're against CeeDee Lamb, so you're going to expect a little bit of back and forth between the two of them. And I thought it was a really good battle to watch, actually. I thought he was unlucky with at least one of those interception attempts. He was unlucky with the ball that he almost swatted away, and CeeDee Lamb made a great catch down the sideline, I thought. So it's those kind of matchups that make the NFL fun, is watching two great NFL players go up against each other and battle it out. So I really enjoyed watching that. I thought Newsome played really well on Sunday, and we on this podcast have been slightly critical of him at times, I think it's fair to say. And the last time we saw him, in fact, he did drop a stinker against the Texans. But I thought, credit where credit's due. I thought he was really good on Sunday as well. Other than that, it's hard to pinpoint any great performances. And then, as Sean said, I think the Cowboys did take their foot off the gas in the second half, so it was hard to really see from an analysis standpoint how good the defense was or wasn't in the second half. I think we'll find out a lot about them this week. Good QB in Trevor Lawrence, good offense. Obviously, a new playmaker in Brian Thomas, who's really good in week one. So it'll be interesting to see how they get on this week and see if they can bounce back. I do think that the defense probably matches up pretty well against their offense this week. So yeah, we'll see if that plays out.
Yeah, I felt like they matched up pretty well the last time they played as well, and obviously there hasn't been too much of a change in both our defense and their offense, so that will be a good matchup there, and a good get right game as well. For that, and that kind of is the antithesis of this of this task that we've given this thing that we've given ourselves on this pod. Is it just week one? We could very well be like, well, we absolutely slaughtered Trevor Lawrence and the Jags offense. We could very easily say that and suddenly be on the up again. Even if we won 6-3 or something stupid. Not that I'm saying it's going to be that low, but this defense is capable of that sort of thing, and also the Jags are very capable of not scoring many points as well. Just ask their fans in the second half of Sunday, after thinking it was all done and dusted. I've got one more. I've got one more big one here for my takes, and then I can ask you guys for one if you've got one in your back pocket here. But wide receivers dropping passes is one that I've got here. Is that just week one, or is that a combination of things that we're not likely to see resolved. There's been a lot of they call themselves Watson Warriors. I know it's crap, but there's been quite a bit of tape about putting balls which are either going close to the floor or slightly overthrown, in my view anyway, that have had hands on them and then were dropped instead of going for big gains. Deshaun Watson, of course, didn't make a throw over 15 yards, of which is unheard of in the NFL stats era. So, is this just week one? Is this on Watson? Is it on the wide receivers? Is it rust? Sean, let's go with you, seeing as a wine had quite the lengthy response there.
Yeah, so I think officially 5 drops recorded in the stat book. I mean,
Right.
It's one of those that, as you say, it can be debatable as to what should count and what shouldn't count as a drop. It felt as though, Amari Cooper dropped sort of walking touchdown. That would have obviously been a throw over 15 yards. Strange for Amari to drop one. He's normally obviously very reliable. I think Njoku had one which, Njoku at times seems to catch the really difficult ones and then drop an easy one. That's something that's plagued him throughout his career. And I think Elijah Moore was the other guilty culprit. I think he's had 2 credited for him. Obviously, he was involved certainly in one of the interceptions where it came off his hands, didn't it? So I was frustrated on Sunday that this team hadn't played in the preseason. Yeah, we had that conversation on Sunday. I don't think this team is good enough to have not had those preseason reps, and it looked extremely rusty. So again, I'm going to say, let's not overreact. Let's see what this is like in week 2. I think encouragingly, I thought Jerry Jeudy looked okay. In terms of his first game, I'd like to see a lot more. Don't get me wrong, but I think obviously caught the touchdown. That'll be good for him. Get him off in the right sort of off on the right footing. Cooper was a bit of a non-factor, wasn't he? I think he was targeted a bunch of times, but only came out the game with a couple of catches.
2 for 8, I think he was.
Yeah, so overall a poor day. But again, I think come back to that stat you threw up earlier about the amount of time that Watson had to throw. As I said, in theory, receivers should have been 40, 50 yards down the field with that amount of time, and he didn't throw the ball over 15 yards. So
yeah,
tells you all you need to know. When he did throw it deep, it was about 15 yards out of bounds as well, wasn't it? Let's be honest, it was never close to anybody. So yeah,
you've just reminded me of another stat that I found. There was another one here about the amount of separation. I think that the Browns were in like the top 4 or 5 teams on separation over the weekend, and still couldn't get it done. I can only find the ones about the per pressure drop back at the moment, but yeah, there was definitely good separation with the wide receivers, and the one of which really is egregious to me is one of the ones where he's rolled out to his left to get out of a forced pressure from himself because he's holding onto the ball too long. And this time where he's careening towards pressure from the left, I think it's Amari Cooper. It's either Cooper or Elijah Moore, who's just waving on the elf, pretty much in the middle, just like, just get it to me here, you've got space. And he ends up just like chucking it for an almost interception. It's like a tipped ball on the left-hand sideline. And, what are you supposed to do as a wide receiver at that point? If you're that wide open and you're not being seen, you do have to wonder as to what's going on, and then wonder as to whether you get in-game rust. I do wonder sometimes if some of these are like, well, it's not coming to me anyway. Do I even go full out on this route?
Yeah. No, I agree, mate. I agree. I think I've seen the still of the play that you're on about. Probably a difficult throw, being generous, maybe going back across your body in that particular example. However,
oh yeah, it's the fact that he could have done it while he was standing.
You could have mentioned a number of examples, mate. And I think for me, it fundamentally comes down to what, in my opinion, is the biggest issue with this offense, which I'll come to once we've gone through all of yours, mate.
Owain, do you have anything else to add to this point? Do you think that that's just a week one thing, just a Deshaun thing, a Rust thing?
I don't think it's just a week one thing, because I think there's a combination of reasons why it happened. I think Deshaun Watson's ball placement is really bad, and I think it has been for a long time. You look, back at some of the games last season, and especially that one that we watched week one last year, where he was just thrown into the dirt constantly. You look at the two Sean cited, the two Elijah Moore drops. The first one, he's having to scoop off the floor. So again, like, Deshaun Watson's ball placement awful on that one. And then the second one was probably a bit more Elijah Moore's fault, but still he's having to reach up pretty high after Deshaun Watson rifles a ball too high for him to catch. So I think that's one issue. And the second issue is the three of them, the three main wide receivers for us, haven't got the most amazing hands in the world, I would say. I think it's fair to say. I think Coop has the best hands of the three of them, but I think he's, prone to a drop or two, I think it's fair to say. Njoku has definitely had drop issues throughout his whole career, like Sean said. Elijah Moore seems to drop quite a lot of passes, unfortunately, and Jerry Jeudy's been known for dropping passes since he's come into the league. So I don't really foresee it going away, which is probably quite worrying.
Yeah, not the way I was hoping that one would go there. But safe space. Right, so those are the three that I had. Sean, you said that you've got one that you wanted to throw out to us as well as a, is this a week one thing or not? So the floor is yours.
Yeah, I don't know whether it sort of fits into that. Is it just a week one thing? But potentially, is the biggest issue with this Browns offense confidence? And I would include that in terms of the quarterback's confidence in his own ability, and then the rest of the team's confidence in the quarterback and what they're doing. Because I think, as I said when we were talking about earlier, for me, the whole premise of Stefanski's scheme, and this is a little bit awkward now, because are we running Stefanski's scheme? Are we running, the new coordinator scheme? Are they still trying to figure a little bit of that out? But it's always been built on timing, and it's been built on concepts. That's why Joe Flacco made the game look quite easy. There was passes that Flacco made into windows that you didn't think that were there, because he had that anticipation and he knew, right, I've hit the top of my drop. That's where the ball's going, and the ball went. Now, obviously, at times the ball went when it shouldn't have gone with Flacco, and that was partly what you were always going to get. But obviously, more often than not, it was successful. I think the reason he's held onto the ball so long is he's not trusting what he's seen. He's not got the confidence in his ability to possibly even get the ball there. He's not confident that the line are going to hold him up. And I think when we went behind on the scoreboard, I didn't see a lot of confidence from the team that they were going to be able to turn it around. So is confidence the biggest issue that this team actually needs to fix, rather than anything that's to do with, procedurally or skill or whatever the case may be?
So just to jump in on that one, I think that speaks to a lot of what our pod was last week, doesn't it, Owen? When we're talking, that was more about fan confidence, but player confidence could well be a part of it as well. There's not been a lot of hype in or out of the camp. It's been like the least hyped season that I've known, probably since pre-Baker, if I'm honest. And it's been almost eerie. And you do wonder as to whether or not that has an effect. And you do wonder it's because, there's just not the same sort of like harmony or, things going well in training camp. We heard in training camp when we had pads against the Vikings, for example, that Deshaun had his worst days when he was going up against the Vikings defense. He did a little better in the couple of weeks before the start of the season, but apparently he just wasn't hitting players. You wonder whether or not that does carry into the games, whether or not a lack of running game at the moment. Jerome Ford had 44 yards the other day. Whether or not the lack of being able to get that going has an impact as well. Whether or not there is confusion, maybe confusion could be a massive part of it as well. I reckon some of the players don't know if they're coming or going at the moment, and news like what we've had this week is very unlikely to help as well. So yeah, it's a concern that I don't think is going away for a while, and the only way you're going to be able to turn that around is to pull some performances out the bag. Don't know what you think, Owen.
This is a tough question to answer because my gut feeling is quite depressing. I'll be honest with you.
Safe space.
It is like I think it is a big issue, especially with Watson. I think is a massive confidence issue. I think when the trade was made, I sort of said that like there was more of a chance that he was going to fail than people were giving it credit for. And one of the main reasons I thought that was because before all the allegations and stuff happened, he was a hero in many people's eyes, and you could see he enjoyed being that role model. He enjoyed the love that he received from everyone. As soon as that went away, I thought that was going to be a problem for him to handle. And to be fair, it would be a problem for most people to handle. I don't think I would handle that particularly well either. And I thought it was going to be harder for him to just forget about that when he was playing football. And I think it's hindered him over the years, I think it's fair to say, over the years since. And I think now it's got the potential to become ugly, like incredibly ugly, incredibly quickly. I think I don't know if you two remember, but the first time we actually saw Watson in a Browns uniform was against the Jags. And the reception he got that day was...
Oh, yes. God, I remember that.
Pretty loud and pretty hostile, even though it was only a preseason game. So
yeah, I remember that, and he did not do well in that game either, which just piled on more pressure.
And it did, yeah. So to go back into that environment on Sunday, off the back of what is a really graphic and horrendous allegation this week, he's only going to get more of that abuse. And I think the Browns fans are joining in now, which for him isn't great either. So I think he's going to get a really hostile environment Sunday. I don't foresee it going well for him on Sunday. And like Sean said, they're in a really tough spot, because if they take him out, where do you go from there? Are you committing to just benching him for the rest of his time in Cleveland, even if they can't get out of his guarantees? Because that's probably where you're going if you bench him. Similar situation to when they hopped on that plane. Once they hopped on that plane, the relationship with Baker was mashed, and you weren't getting that back. As soon as you bench Watson, I think the same thing can be said there as well. So
yeah, there's no going back if they make that move.
There's no going back, and I think because of that, I think the next few weeks could become incredibly messy. If things don't start well on Sunday, I think the next few weeks are going to be really messy, and we could be sat here in week 4 or 5 thinking, wow, where are we going here? I don't know. I think Sunday's going to be tough. I think the strength of schedule means that the 3rd and 4th game of that sort of 4-game mini series, they should win, even with one of us playing quarterback. To be quite frank, like I think we would get a win there. So I don't know. I had it. To be fair, Josh, I said last week that I had a bad feeling last week, and this whole week has made it 10 times worse. That feeling. So yeah.
I don't think. I think that even with the way that we left that pod last week, I wouldn't say I was chipper, and I wouldn't say that I was expecting a blowout. But by the same token, I don't think I was expecting what we saw or what we were expecting to see on Sunday. And I think that we're all in the boat that we're expecting to see. If we're to come away with something, it's going to come from the defensive side of the ball, not from the offensive side, of which we've been in quite a few situations like that over the past 12 months. And yeah, I mean, that sends that just gives me a lot more questions and answers, and we're not going to get through to it at this point. The final question before moving on to a prediction for Sunday and then closing out the show, just on that, do you think that AB and the rest of the team look at how the Broncos broke ties with Russell Wilson as a potential blueprint for how it might be perceived both in and out of Browns fandom for breaking ties with Deshaun if that emergency glass does need to be broken? If, for example, we're living in a world where nothing happens with the other thing going on right now.
I think in terms of a fan perspective, I think they can do no wrong by cutting him. I don't think at this point, I think 75% at least of the fan base would be quite happy if they cut him and had to eat 172 million and then trade away a load of more players. I think it's gone to that stage with a lot of fans. So yeah, I don't think from a fan's perspective they would be too bothered by cutting him. I think a lot of people now think it's the right thing to do. I think you can go into a completely other discussion with fans starting to find their morals because he's playing awfully. I think you could go into a different discussion about that completely.
Yes, moral suitability is definitely something that is a little upsetting at the moment more than anything else. But yeah, no, I think you cock on there.
If he's listening, I don't know if that's how you say his name, but prominent social media figure Nick Cairns or Nick Cairns.
Oh
yes, and I think that one would have quite heavily been aimed at him. But no, I don't think, like, looking at the Russell Wilson situation, I don't think it's not all that similar really. And I don't think you'd find many Browns fans caring if they ate a lot of money to get rid of him.
Yeah, I think try and put a little bit of balance back into it like I did earlier. You know, the last time we saw him prior to Sunday, let's not forget, was the comeback win in Baltimore. And we thought potentially has something clicked. You know, let's wait and see how the next few days go. That's again trying to separate the off field to the on field. If it was off field, everybody on this podcast hopefully knows by now, I'd have never have had him on the team. I'd have wanted him off the team from the minute we got him. In terms of on the field, in terms of his playing, does he justify being the starter and all the rest of it? That day in Baltimore was the only sign that we saw that was anything like positive. You know, that was only 2 games ago now in terms of what we saw. So, you know, you've got no confidence that it's going to happen on Sunday. I think Sunday's going to be really tough. We'll get to the prediction on that in a minute. I think Sunday's going to be tough. I really do. I think they need to just make the right decision for the team. I think the way they've structured the contract and the way they've done it, it doesn't really make sense to actually cut him. It's like Wine said, I think ultimately he'll end up as the most expensive backup quarterback that never plays, to be honest, in terms of the way that they would manage the cap. You know, and they'd have to do that way. I think he'd eat about 28, 29% of the cap in sort of 3 years' time based on the current projections. You know, for everybody that says, well, he hasn't affected the roster building, that's how it affects the roster building. Doesn't mean you can't build a quality roster around him. It just means that's 29% of the money that you can't spend elsewhere. So the roster could have been 29% better. But they have to, you know, potentially go down that route. So, you know, look, ultimately, there's always been 2 ways out of this that are preferential, which is from a football standpoint, is either that good that you actually look back and think, you know what, money well spent. We've had a really good quarterback. He's got us to where we wanted to get to. The other option is, as you say, you've got a way of getting out the contract and you know, wishing it and never ever happened. So, you know, we'll wait and see where we are. But I think this is going to drag on, and I do think we're in for a really uncomfortable next few weeks, to be honest, because I think we're going to have some difficult stuff to watch on the field and some difficult stuff to deal with off the field.
Yes, this is not getting sorted in 2 weeks. This is something that's going to drag into November. I just have that feeling. I feel like it's all going to come out in the wash in October, and then a decision's going to be made maybe around Halloween. I mean, they've been quite quick, actually, the NFL, in a few other bits. But I feel like because of the fact that you haven't got a legal trial, it's civil suit, not a criminal suit. There's ambiguity in what they can go. It has to be done through the personal conduct policy, of which is a different kettle of fish and longer to go on. So yeah, this is something that's going to be a lot longer to permeate through into us. Sean, you were teasing your prediction there, without actually giving us one. Do you want to share with us what you expect it to be?
Yeah, I'm usually the most optimistic, but I can't see anything other than a defeat on Sunday, if I'm honest. I thought the Jags gave the game away on Sunday to the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins have got a much more potent offense than what we have. This will obviously be the Jags' home opener, and I think, as Owain said earlier, I think Trevor Lawrence is up there as one of the better quarterbacks on his day. They'll be looking to make a statement at home. It's very difficult to sort of go from where the Browns were this Sunday in terms of the offensive output or the lack of offensive output, and envisage a scenario where we're going to be able to put up 20 points plus. And even if the defense plays well, giving up less than 20 is the defense playing pretty well. And as I say, I just don't have the confidence that we're going to be able to sort of get anywhere near that. So I'm afraid I'm going to, unfortunately, back against us, which isn't something I generally like to do. But I can't see us, like I say, unfortunately, scoring the volume of points that we're going to need. So I'm going to go for the Jags to win, and probably win by, at least double digits.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm reeling from.
At least double digits, meaning it could actually drift into triple digits, or
if we lose by triple digits, that would be mightily impressive. No, I would imagine we'll be, like I say, either 10, 14 points. I think it's going to be a couple of scores, whether it's a touchdown and field goal or a couple of touchdowns. That's the kind of margin. I'm not expecting to lose by 30, don't get me wrong, but I could see it being a comfortable Jags win. May well be similar to this week, that it's a garbage touchdown from the Browns to sort of put an air of respectability on the scoreboard, but I can't see anything other than a defeat, which is a real shame to say that in week 2, when we were all very optimistic sort of 6-7 weeks ago before pre-season started.
Owain, I dare to ask as to what your prediction is, considering that's Sean's prediction. But yeah, can I ask for yours?
Yeah, I've got us losing pretty big as well. I think if you were pressing me on a score, I would go for 27-14.
Oh, okay, so that is a slight improvement on last week.
No, I think I had us last week, didn't I? I don't think I picked
No. As in an improvement over the final score.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah. That's a 3-point improvement on how we did against the Cowboys. I think I've got it a little closer. I just don't kind of believe the Jags squad as much as the first half of that game against the Dolphins. I feel like the Dolphins started slow rather than Jacksonville started quickly. I don't have us winning it, but I have it being a quite close game. I've got it being one of these 17-14 types. I don't think that Jacksonville is going to score a lot of points. I don't believe in Trevor Lawrence all that much. And the second half of that game kind of proved it for me. So yeah, keep it close. Anything can happen when scores are that low. I believe the defense will have its head screwed on a bit more, and that basically means score 3 times, you got a chance. So yeah, let's see what happens. Anyway, we will be back next week, probably around the same time. I think, Owain, you've got training on Wednesday, so it will probably end up being Thursdays more likely. We'll let you guys know when we know. We'll go through, obviously, whatever is most pertinent at the time, depending on what happens in the Jacksonville game, as we then look forward to the Giants game. Until then, we hope that you enjoy the game on Sunday. We hope for our sakes as well. And we'll be back next week. Cheers, guys, and go Browns.
Wow, what a struggle. The way it should be, I guess.